This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Eleanor, do you like peanuts or peanut butter?
Oh, absolutely. I can't live without it.
Really?
Oh, I have jars of it. And I have bags of them. And all other nuts, too. I like all nuts.
Okay. Well, my mom...
She still stays around me, so...
You're a nut.
I am a nut.
He's a nut.
My mom loves peanut butter, and she had jars around it in her house when she was pregnant with my sister. Mm-hmm. And then my sister had a peanut allergy.
Ew.
And we could no longer have it in the house.
Oh, devastating.
And I am not allergic to peanuts or peanut butter, but for some reason I couldn't stand the smell of it. So if someone had a peanut butter sandwich next to me at the school table, I would throw a big fit and I would scoot as far away as I can.
Yuck.
And then when I met my husband, he didn't like peanut butter either, but he wasn't allergic. So I'm like, well, we're soulmates.
Yep. This will work.
So why am I talking about peanuts? Well, it is one of the major allergens, and we just read a book called The End of Food Allergy. And it's all about these 9 most common food allergies, what we can do about it, the research behind it, and much, much more.
Yeah. So who wrote the book? Is it called The End of Food Allergy, featuring immunotherapy? The first program to prevent, they say, and reverse a 21st century epidemic.
Wait, you can reverse food allergies?
Well, we're going to find out. But the 2 people that wrote this book are Kari and Nadeau, who is an MD, PhD, and she is director of the Sean Parker Center for Allergy and Asthma Research at Stanford University and one of the world's leading experts on food allergy. She's got a lot of credentials. She's a professorship in medicine and pediatrics at Stanford. She has both an MD and PhD from the Harvard School of Medicine, and she's a member of Stanford's Maternal and Child Health Research Institute. So she's an active researcher, active clinician, and extremely well-credentialed. Now, what about the other author?
Sloan Barnett.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she is the mother of 2 children with food allergies. Mm-hmm. So she provides that perspective to the research.
Yeah.
And do you know Sloan Barnett from your company as well?
I do. She's a lawyer and a journalist and a New York Times bestselling author. Green Goes with Everything, Simple Steps to Healthier Life and Cleaner Planet. And she's on a lot of boards. And, her husband owns a supplement company.
Okay.
Yeah, natural supplement company.
So this book is really comprehensive, almost too comprehensive on food allergies, wouldn't you say?
I wouldn't go that far. What I
Okay.
would say is it was a difficult read. For me, it was a laborious read. There's some great information in here, and I think this is a topic that you have that personal story, but in my circle of acquaintances, matter of fact, here at the studio, one of my acquaintances was telling us a story about a friend of his who lost a child due to food exposure.
Yeah, it was, and they didn't have any clue that there was an allergy to this. 10 years old, it was Mother's Day. Went to the grocery store to pick up stuff. The girl asked her dad, "Hey, I've never had a pistachio. Can we get some?" And he's like, "Sure." They go home. She ate 1 pistachio. And within hours, she was dead.
Oh, my gosh.
That's so tragic and
It is
scary.
traumatic, yeah. And the book starts with a story that's similar to that. In my neighborhood, I have a young mom of 3 kids, and they're doing food avoidance because of they were able to find out their child had an allergy before such a terrible outcome. Mm-hmm. So this is the story in this book about people who have children living with food allergies and navigating that world. And I think they have really good background information, extensive research review, which is one of the reasons I think it was somewhat difficult to read because they would take a single paper, go through it, take another paper, go through it, and tell you what happened, how many people were in it, what the interventions were, and what the outcomes were. And that's good in a research community because people are kind of attuned to listening to that. But I think in the general public, this book may be a little difficult. But what they did was they structured each chapter with a bottom line. So if you're one of these readers that doesn't want that detail, you can jump to the bottom line synopsis at the end of the chapters, and it's very helpful.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking is that, this is in 3 parts, and it really could be 3 different books because I could see people needing a book because they were newly diagnosed with a food allergy, and then they want to read that part in the book that helps them understand what they need to do next. Or maybe they just want to understand the history of food allergy. But yeah, I think that it is, so there's 3 parts: understanding food allergy, the science of treating and reversing food allergy, and then personal and global perspectives.
Yeah, and then they say they're going to divide the book into 2 parts after they've split it into 3. And the part 1 is going to be showing the harrowing numbers that show dramatic rise of conditions over the past 30 years. They're going to unpack various theories seeking to explain why the increase is happening. And then and they're going to talk about genetic inheritance, pregnancy tests, breastfeeding diets, pathways through food confusion, all sorts of good things, and the food labeling laws. And then part 2, they're going to talk about the new era of food allergy and what they are hoping is going to be a bright future to help folks that are struggling with this. And I thought that was kind of nice to know that they were heading off into two areas. But the numbers, it's really been increasing. They say in a couple of decades, we've had skyrocketing increases of food allergies.
Yeah, what I read, 2.2% of the world.
Something like that. And it's, we all 3 here in this room have had an experience with it, so it's something that touches lots of lives. And they say that they put a geographic map in here and show the densities of where these problems are worst. And that would be in Finland, United Kingdom, and what was the other one? You remember?
UK?
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, you said United Kingdom.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's not America, but America's going to catch up is what they're saying. And depending on which age group you're looking at, that's it too. Kristen, I thought it might be good if we're going to talk about allergy, if we go over a couple of vocabulary terms that were helpful to me. And if anybody's listening and you have the book, it's around page 15. So they did it early in the book where they talked about what is an allergy.
I think this is really important too, Eleanor, because in episode 16, we talked about healthy gut, healthy you.
Yes.
And I think I might have mentioned this, that he kind of lumps all of these different types of reactions we can have to food as a food allergy. And as you go over these this terminology in the book, you see that she's talking about a very specific food allergy, and food allergy in the more classic sense of what we know it to be.
Yeah, and I think knowing which category you fall in affects how you intervene.
Yes.
And that's the point they want to make. So the allergy is when you really have a reaction that kicks off the immune response, and you'll get itchy skin, wheezing, watery eyes, nasal congestion, coughing, buildup of mucus, your blood pressure drops when you encounter the allergen. And that's what can be deadly. I mean, you can have all of that happening at once and your cardiovascular system can't handle it.
And no matter how small the dose.
Exactly, right.
And this is a very specific type of reaction called the IgE, immune cell response.
Right. And so what I was going to say with that right there, since I am a particular reader, when I saw them say this reaction involves a type of immune cell called immunoglobulin E, or IgE for short, I just said, IgE is an immunoglobulin. Globulins are proteins. Proteins are not cells. So it's a molecule. And I thought, I'm a little bothered by that, but I'm not going to stop reading, because what they were saying is when you get an excess of IgE kicking out, it's going to go talk to these other cells, because it's made in plasma cells. It's going to talk to the mast cells and basophils, and those are the cells that are going to kick out the histamine. And the histamine is a reactive chemical in our body that is going to contract smooth muscle like in your lungs and cause the narrowing of the airways. It's going to dilate blood vessels, which is going to cause permeability, and is going to let the immune cells get out of the bloodstream to the area where this invader is, this allergen, this foreign substance, and do what they do. And that's going to also lower blood pressure, because when you dilate all the capillary beds, the volumes change, puts strain on the heart. And your stomach's going to get involved because they're secreting cells. So with that permeability, you're going to get more gastric acid secretion, and your heart rate's going to go up because of all this mess. So that is, to me, the biological story that I wish they had put in here a little more clearly, because they jump into some detailed molecules quickly and then talk about all this variety of cells. And if you don't understand how they're related, it's kind of hard to follow their story.
But this is the IgE-mediated type of allergy is the most intense and scary that could take your life.
Absolutely.
And there could be different types or different, what do I want to say, spectrums of how your body reacts, right? Like my sister, when she had her first IgE reaction, it wasn't as intense as this poor 10-year-old that we spoke of. And then she's had more intense reactions. It just depends, but it's still this IgE-mediated where your body is attacking itself, so to speak.
Yeah, and they get into talking about the reaction. I think they're saying 300 milligrams of the allergen versus 1,000 milligrams versus 2 to 4, is one of these things. So it could be the dose response that your sister experienced, but she had the reaction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the thing that a lot of us might confuse with this, and I think you said Ruschio lumped in there, was intolerance, food intolerance.
And sensitivity.
Yeah. So what's the difference between intolerance and sensitivity?
So a food intolerance is basically in your gut. And the easiest way to think about it is many of us have lactose intolerance, where if we have some of the sugar that's naturally present in milk, our bodies have a hard time digesting that, and it causes a lot of gas and bloating. And there are other certain things that our body just doesn't tolerate in the gut and might not be able to break down. So it's a digestive system issue, not necessarily an immune response.
Yeah, and so if you know anybody that says, I can't eat beans, they make me gassy, they have a little bit of intolerance maybe. Mm-hmm. Or I can't eat peppers, they affect my stomach, it hurts. Those are signs that it's an intolerance. You're not having this wheezy, itchy, low blood pressure reaction. So that's a good distinction, I think. And then sensitivity, this causes discomfort, sometimes serious, but these two are not a food allergy in the minds of these authors. Like celiac disease, a person may have severe diarrhea after eating wheat. Serious condition needs to be considered, but it isn't a food allergy by definition. It's the inability to process that food in the gut, right?
Right. Well, not necessarily. So the sensitivity could mean that you are having an immune response. It's not an IgE immune response, but it is a smaller response that can cause like a low-grade inflammation if you continue to eat that food that you're sensitive to.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's sensitivity.
Yeah.
And then the best one that I like to experience is tolerance.
Yay.
You can have an exposure and nothing happens. It's a delightful experience.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then when they're talking about this new window for the immunotherapy, they're saying that they want to get to a state of sustained unresponsiveness so that you don't respond to the allergens.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of a goal. All right,
so those are the definitions.
Yeah, so
to move us forward here.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about numbers, on the rise, and those things could be due to things like pesticide use on foods or overuse of antibiotics. So there's some other things that might be contributing to that.
processed foods. And I think she mentions the hygiene where we're overly clean. And we talked about that in the mind-gut connection, I think, and the healthy gut, healthy you, just how getting out in the woods can help us with exposure and such. So she does go over these theories, but concludes that no single theory explains why food allergies are trending up. And we're trying to figure it out, but the science isn't pointing in one clear direction.
Right. Which means, and there are a lot of people interested in researching this.
Yeah.
I was impressed with the number of attention related articles coming out. So I think we should be hopeful, and I think these authors are hopeful that we're on the edge or on the cusp of figuring out some good solutions for people who do have a problem with this. One of the things that we think helps us is product labeling, and we've talked about that before. And they made a point of saying food labels will not protect you if you have one of these issues.
Because they're not always accurate, unfortunately.
Yeah. They say the labeling laws are improving but vary country to country. Those dealing with food allergies should be aware of the regulations in their area. And I thought, often you want to just look at the label and say, okay, this is going to be safe. Or you go in a restaurant, you have no clue.
It's very frustrating, I can imagine, to not feel like you can trust the food around you, and it takes an emotional toll on you.
Yeah.
And she does have a chapter in that, but speaking of emotions, I thought chapter 3 was really important. Chapter 3 is called, Is It My Fault? Escaping the Blame Game. So I had a conversation with my mom, and she definitely could relate. She said, I kept blaming myself. Was it because I had so much peanut butter when I was pregnant with your sister? Or, I should have done this or that to avoid this reaction. But I thought that, and probably because Sloan has 2 children with allergies, she could really relate to how it's easy to blame ourselves and to feel that guilt and shame of what we did. But I really like she has this chart that lays out the answers to these questions we often ask, and strong evidence-based.
You want to share a little bit about the information in that?
Yeah. So a lot of people think, can the diet during pregnancy trigger food allergy? And we know now that the evidence is really strong. No, mom can eat anything she wants during pregnancy. So don't be afraid of, indulging in whatever you're craving when you're pregnant for the sake of food allergies.
For me, it was asparagus.
Really? That's a funny one.
Yeah, my husband had to stop in the grocery store parking lots and go get me cans of asparagus and open them in the car. And he was so good. He did it, and it was so wonderful.
Eleanor, that's so weird.
Gross.
Well, I know, I'm a strange lady.
Was
that too much information? I'm sorry.
No, I have never had canned asparagus, side note.
Oh, and it's not good. It's not, I mean, who wants canned asparagus? But boy, I did. I love fresh asparagus.
Funny. I don't know that I had any strong cravings I can remember that were like ongoing. Okay, the other thing is, if you have a C-section during delivery, is that a risk factor for food allergy?
Oh, yeah, let's feel guilty about that. You need to save mom's life, and you're going to put this burden of guilt on her?
I know, right? Oh. So if you know me in person, I am tiny. I am 5 foot nothing, and my mom is also small, and she had 10-pound babies.
Oh, Lord.
So she had to have C-sections, and, If it weren't for C-sections, I might not be here. Mm-hmm, so we should not feel guilty about that. But the research says it is a possibility that the C-section can increase the risk. And we talked a little bit about that in Ruscio's
Healthy Gut, Healthy You, where that early exposure, and we'll talk more about that in this book as well, but early exposure to the microbes set up the training of your immune system.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have one when you're born. It has to learn. It has to be educated, and it does that by contact. And if you skip a vaginal delivery, that would be the first exposure to some microbes that the child would not have received across the placenta.
Right. So the science is not as strong in this area, but does show that possible link.
Oh, but they do put the babies on the mom's skin.
And that's helpful.
I mean, if they do that, that's another way to introduce mom's micro flora to the newborn.
Which I don't think they always did that, especially after a C-section.
But they do sometimes. So it's, it just depends on which practice you're in.
Well, I think they're doing it more and more now that we know more. So the other question is, does a mother's diet during breastfeeding increase the likelihood of a food allergy in a nursing infant? Thankfully, the answer is no. There's very strong evidence that we can eat anything we want when we're breastfeeding. I do know that sometimes... sometimes the baby can already have an intolerance, or you might think that they're not tolerating something because they're extra colicky, and I know mothers have tried to cut things out of their diet with some success there. But if you're just trying to prevent food allergies, you don't have to cut something out just because you're breastfeeding. But
then again, the other point that they keep making over and over and over in this book is to partner with credentialed physicians. You know what I'm saying? Health professionals that will guide you through this. Don't try to read a book and do it yourself necessarily.
Yes.
If you have this concern.
If you have any food allergies in your family, particularly.
Partner with professionals.
Yes. Absolutely. And then lastly, do some types of formula increase the risk of food allergy? And the evidence is very strong that it does not.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a really important chapter because I feel it. My mom said it, that we can all kind of question, was it something that I did? And we can stop the blame game there.
Yeah, we need, the emotional toll is real. On that food thing, I was really intrigued. They told a story in here about a Middle Eastern mom who was feeding a very young baby a biscuit type thing that had all sorts of different grains in it. And I can't remember the name of that biscuit, but the country she's from has a very low incidence of food allergies. And it kind of went along the line. So we need to talk about the hygiene hypothesis, and I'll bring this biscuit story back up. But this idea of keeping things really clean and avoiding foods is part of the hygiene hypothesis that has caused the recommendation to be avoid the allergen-containing food.
Yeah, and chapter 5 is all about this avoidance myth. We used to think, and I worked in WIC for a long time, which stands for Women, Infant, and Children, and we would counsel these families on how to introduce foods for the first time, and we used to think that avoiding peanuts until age 1 was really helpful, and other common allergies.
And we're changing that idea.
And now I think it was Israel that they were feeding their kids these peanut puffs.
Yep, that's what I was talking about.
Yes.
Israel, yes.
And so now we've changed those guidelines and know that it's best to introduce these common allergens as early as 4 to 6 months.
Absolutely.
And then these little puffs that they were having became really popular over in America.
Yes. Yeah, because what they were finding, here's what's so cool. I don't know where it fits in the story, but I want to share it right now. The idea that if you put something in your mouth for the first time you've ever been near this thing, your body's going to say, ooh, that must be food. It's okay. We'll tolerate it. But let's say that's a peanut. You eat the peanut, and you've never been touched by a peanut before. The body's going to say, oh, peanuts are cool. We like them. However, if you've never had a peanut and your mom has a peanut butter sandwich and has peanut butter on her lips and kisses your cheek, your skin absorbs the peanut allergen, and your skin is programmed to say, we don't know what this is. Let's have a reaction to it and keep it away. So the next time you put it in your mouth, your body has learned, this is foreign. We don't like it. And then we have the reaction. And I thought that was a total new concept, that the skin, if the first introduction to the allergen is through the skin, you're more likely to have a reaction, food allergy reaction, when you put it in your mouth. And I have a sister who, this is sidebar, but it's sort of the same thing. She did not have braces. My brother and I had braces. She gets her ears pierced, and she has a reaction to the metals and can't wear anything but gold. Lucky woman. Lucky lady. It's a smart move on her part. But anyway, the idea that having metal braces in your mouth said, oh, nickel's okay. And this was back in the 50s, I guess, when they had nickel in them. Now they use plastics and those sorts of things. But I was introduced to nickel through the GI system, and then when I got my ears pierced, I have no problem. I can wear all the cheap jewelry there is. I'm having a good time. So that idea that where is the first contact with the allergen was kind of news to me in this book as an idea. I don't know that they flushed that out because these are theories.
Right.
The hygiene hypothesis is an idea. Hypotheses are ideas, but maybe staying too clean is not good. So those biscuits from Israel, that diversity of exposures earlier, I think goes along with Ruscio's Healthy Gut, Healthy You book as well, because he was saying by the age of 3, you've set up your microbiome, and the way you set it up is to be exposed. And if you're cleaning all your surfaces and children are putting things in their mouth that are sterile, they're not getting those exposures. So we can almost be too clean is the idea.
Yeah, and to go back to what you're saying about the skin, the first time something stood out to me in here for the first time too is that those who have eczema are much more likely to have the allergies, and that's because of that weakened barrier of the skin. And my sister had the skin problems before she had the allergies. According to my mom, I called her up and I said, which happened first?
Yeah.
I got to know.
Yeah, so the skin was acting as a trainer on the things that she came into contact with.
Yeah, so that was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought so too. That was something I had not run across before reading this book.
And then lastly, she does have a whole chapter 10 on the... Oh.
Yeah, but before we get there, one of the things she does talk about in here is the pharmaceutical industry. And all the attention they're trying to get to make products to put you on drugs to help control these allergies. And I thought that was a pretty interesting read. And there was a series of drugs that all end with MAB. And I know a little bit about pharmacology, but not much. But I know that sometimes those suffixes tell you stuff. MAB stands for monoclonal antibody. So any drug that has that at the end of it is a monoclonal antibody drug. And that means they're synthesizing the antibody, which is a protein, in the labs. So you're getting a synthesized protein.
And what was your major takeaway from her section on pharmaceuticals?
It's big money to be made.
Yeah.
Big money to be made. And but I think drugs can help. If the thing is, they tell you if you have a food allergy and you've had a reaction, get an EpiPen. EpiPens cost something like $650, and you need 2 of them. And so this is an expensive thing. And if you don't have that kind of money, and they have to be switched out because they wear out. I mean,
they expire.
Yeah, they expire. So this is an ongoing expense. So the other issue with that is training on how to use the EpiPen. And then if you're a young kid, which these allergies typically, they're more young kid allergies, I think, than old fogies getting a food allergy for the first time. It happens. But so you want your kid to have independence. But how do you help them do that when they're afraid? And so this life of growing up in fear, it breaks my heart. And there's a story at the end of the book where this child was told he was allergic at a very early age, and maybe 10 years of living this lifestyle of I can't, I won't, I have to watch, I have to be on alert, my parents have to be on alert, all of their parents have to be responsible if they're going to, all that dynamic that is really stressful, which we know is not good for anybody's health. Turns out he didn't have the allergy. Do you remember that story at the end?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what a wasted, 11 years for this kid. But luckily he found out that he could eat these things and he could have a normal life. But that emotional toll that you were talking about earlier is pervasive in these groups of people who have children that are different than everyone else's. And they have, extraordinary circumstances that have to be monitored.
Yeah, the emotional toll goes in so many different directions. Yeah. So, the child being in fear, and then how they're treated in school
Bullied.
Or society, and then the parents' anxiety about sending them to school
or to camp.
Yeah. So this leads me into, an acquaintance of mine that I know from my daughter's school, her children have food allergies, and she went through this immunotherapy to reverse food allergies.
Now, you that is not an approved therapy yet. And what I am looking at was all these articles that they wrote and reviewed in here. Most of them had few participants, like 30 people, and they would do things to them, and then they would draw conclusions. Well, we know from evidence-based medicine that a study based on 30 people doesn't have the strength of conclusion that a randomized placebo, blinded trial would.
Yeah.
But you can't get the numbers for that.
Right.
So they're caught in a rock and a hard place as far as the science on this thing. But so these private allergy places can offer this immunotherapy, and they may be clinical trials that you can get involved with to do it. But you have to be careful on which allergy specialist you select, don't you?
Well, I think I'd love to have this gal on our show and talk to us about it, but I think hers was actually part of a study.
There you go. And that's one way you can get access to this with the supervision that you need to protect your participant.
Yeah. And the reason I think they don't have the numbers is I called my sister up because she now has 3 children, and her oldest is allergic to peanuts. And
are they doing avoidance?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I said, did you do this test? And she said, no, I could not just even imagine the process of watching her eat a peanut.
And that's what happened to that kid that found out he wasn't allergic. He did that. Because they're saying in this book, and Ruscio said this too, food allergy testing is totally unreliable. Not totally, 50% reliable, which is a big, it could be false positive, false negative.
Well, it depends on the test, and there is a pretty
the gold standard
here.
The gold standard they recommend is the oral challenge, and that's what you're saying.
The oral immunotherapy, yeah.
Yeah, that is when you will know you absolutely have a reaction.
Yeah, and you should only do 100%. That if you're worried, you should only do that around a trained physician.
Yeah, that has the crash cart right next to you.
Yes,
that knows what to do, and that's what they were trying to tell this kid: eat the peanut, and even if you go into cardiac arrest, we'll bring you back. And so he brings the peanut up to his mouth and says, "I can't do it." He paralyzes. Trying to get over that head game.
Could he touch it with his hands?
I don't know if he had it on a fork or how, but yeah, he was traumatized, but he actually did it, and then he got these great results. So you didn't have a reaction. There you are. You're talking to us.
I have a friend who has an allergy to watermelon, to cucumbers, bananas.
According to the skin prick tests?
I don't know. It's according to him. So he says, but he can eat like pickles, but he can't have cucumbers. I think it's because of the pickling process kills whatever it is that bothers him.
Or breaks down the
I'm
molecule.
like, is this really true? Should we go to the hospital and you walk in the middle, throw a cucumber in your mouth and just see what happens?
Well, we would. They'd probably do a little more control than that. It's
Yeah.
smaller.
No. That was just us on our experiment.
Our conversation.
Yeah.
Well, you're right in line with these guys.
Yeah. Go in there and throw a cucumber in or take a big bite of banana or something and see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens.
But this girl, my daughter's age, is, her homework was to eat peanuts every day. Mm-hmm. She had to for
like
it to work.
Yeah, and that's what they say it is. Your therapy is eat a peanut a day. And that's a sustained unresponsiveness that we talked about earlier, that this oral immunotherapy might provide people, is sustaining that.
Yeah, so I can see why the numbers aren't very high, because the anxiety of going through that process. And then on the flip side, I could see her, the point of going through it, because now as a mom sending her kid to school, she has a little less anxiety about whether they're exposed. And I just think about my mom, and when my sister was growing up, the food allergies weren't as popular and tolerated, and teachers and everybody weren't as trained on that. So just the anxiety of sending her off into the world. Yeah,
where they keep the EpiPen in the classroom, is it at the teacher's desk or at the nurse's station? And the nurse is maybe 3 stories away. That is just, so this oral immunotherapy that these authors are introducing us to and saying we're on the cutting edge, watch this story, there's some good news coming. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's very hopeful to me, this book, even though it was difficult to read. They're the 6 Ds that I wanted to share. when they're talking about the future of living with food allergies.
Mm-hmm.
They say there's 6 Ds. The dual benefit to making lifestyle changes that favor environmentally friendly choices, which is one of my favorite things. You know, can do something that's a win-win for you and the environment. That's a good thing. So they recommend the 6 Ds is watch the laundry detergents that you're using. Some of those contain enzymes called proteases that break down protein molecules, and that can affect the skin and dry the skin and cause the eczemas and the things that would then allow allergens to come through. Other thing, the harsh detergents are bad for the ecosystem because they affect algal blooms and deplete oxygen and so on and so forth. Have a dog. You know, a lot of people have dogs. This is a good thing. We've run across this in one of our other books.
Yes, we have.
And in this book, they say because dogs become a vehicle for bringing the outside in, bringing nature inside your house.
And that exposure.
Yeah, and I love the way they worded that. The dirt they track in after a walk and the mini ecology that is in their fur are likely to contain healthy bacteria that you may not otherwise be exposed to. I think that's great. And then diversity, we talked about eat food, not too much, mostly plants, but the diversity, because there's safe bacteria on those plants that come into our system and build a vigorous immune system. And another favorite of mine that we've run across before is vitamin D. There is a relationship to vitamin D deficiency to food allergies as well as all the other things we've talked about. So most of us in the United States are vitamin D deficiency. Go outside if you can. If you can't, you need to supplement.
And get tested. Ask your physician to take a test so you can see where your blood levels are and you know how much to supplement.
And I would like it to be in the standard order because when you ask for tests, sometimes you get charged and the insurances don't pay and it becomes cost prohibitive to say, hey, I want to know. Well, there's no medical reason for me to ask. Well, yeah, there is a medical reason and it should be in the standard panel. So that opinion. Strong opinion. Dryness, make sure that you keep your skin moisturized, but don't use wax or petroleum-based products. They're not as effective as lipid-based products for treating dryness and reducing allergy risk. And then dirt, you know, I call it soil, they call it dirt. Put your hands in the ground. It's good for us therapeutically. I'm back to nature, the forest bathing again.
Go play in the woods, grow your own food.
But that data show that the range of microbes we encounter when we spread time outside dwarfs what we encounter inside our houses. Yeah. Because we keep them too clean, in my opinion. Okay, so those are the 6 Ds, and I thought that was good. There are going to be new food allergy policies that will affect labeling in restaurants to help against fatal allergens for folks. So all in all, at the end of this book, there's a huge bibliography. It was well documented, I thought, and referenced. And I would recommend the book for people who know they're facing this crisis, but just with a word of caution, you may not want to read all the pages. Maybe you will.
Yeah, definitely some good information. And I think you could just kind of look in the summary or in the index and go to those points.
The bottom lines, yeah.
Yeah.
But aren't you hopeful about the oral immunotherapy options?
I am.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful just in general, the more research and the more focus we put, on better food labeling, paying more attention in that nature.
Right.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, we're done. I'm done with this book unless you have something else to say.
That's it. I'd love, we would always love to hear your reactions to this book or, the things that we talked about related to food allergy. And if you have any stories, feel free to share them with us.
And you sound like in your work with people, you can help them, guide them if this is an issue towards some professionals.
Yeah, definitely. And so we don't specialize in food allergies, but we definitely can help direct you to someone who might have more experience in that area. Whether that's a dietitian or your doctor to go see.
And your business name is?
But I'm Kristen from Well Balanced Nutrition, and what we do help a lot with is meal planning. So visit our website.
More plants.
Eating more plants. Visit our website at wellbalancednutrition.com. Come join our free Facebook group and be a part of our conversation over there.
And I'm Eleanor Russell with 360 healthforyou.com, and I'm very interested in environmental sustainability. So if you're interested in getting some of these detergents that are not the harsh ones, that are more friendly on the ecosystem, or if you're interested in vitamin D supplementation or moisturizing your skin with lipid-based products, I am the one to talk to. Eleanor Russell, 360healthforyou.com.
You've got some great products for that, definitely.
I do.
Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.